Hello bass family and welcome to Everything Bass. Hey, we're moving on with modes. We're at modes 4, Lydian. The Lydian mode is very interesting, and I want to take a moment to kind of remind you, like when I started this channel, some of the very first videos I presented were all the intervals between the root and the octave. So you learned where major seconds were and major thirds, perfect fourths, perfect fifths, all those things. I also taught you the theory of intervals, like when you need to make an interval minor, how does it move? When you need to make an interval from perfect to diminish, how does it move? And things like that, or perfect to augmented. And I did that for a reason, and really it was in vision of learning things like the modes, where sometimes some students have had a hard time remembering which mode is which, and I think having that background intervallic information, it checks one box, and that's how to remember one or define one scale from another. Also, one of the first videos was the basic major scale, and that's kind of point zero for a lot of our theory. If we learn the major scale, then it's sometimes, like in case of today, it helps us remember a new version or another scale based on what's altered from the major scale. So that's why if you have jumped into these videos halfway through, I encourage you to maybe go back, and I've made playlists on my channel for basically so you can see like what I think is foundational knowledge, and then like lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3, and I group videos as if I was teaching you privately in one-on-one in person, where I would give you certain items to work on and perfect, then move to the next lesson. If you could do that, then things like this might be a lot easier. It's not that hard anyway, but I just wanted to let you know. Okay, so we are moving on. Now we're learning Lydian, and today we're going to do it with the root F Lydian. Now I choose that, and this is the first way, the first memory trigger on how to remember it, is if you play F Lydian, that is in the key of C. And hopefully by now you've learned that the key of C has no sharps and flats. So if you were to start on the 8th fret F on the A string, and play only natural notes up to the octave, you would get F Lydian. So let me do that and say the notes as I play them. So we've got F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F. So that's one way to memorize it. Now let's look at another way, and that is, how does it differ from Ionian, or the common major scale? Well, there's only one note that changes. Ionian, like if I was to play F Ionian, but I take the 4th note here, which is a B flat, and I make it B natural, I move it up, it's an augmented 4th, we get Lydian. It's very cool. Another way to memorize it might be how you finger it in the most commonly accepted fingering for the scale. So you start with your middle finger on the root and play the pinky. Then you play index, ring, pinky, and on the next string, index, ring, pinky. So the only time you use your middle finger on the entire scale is to play the root. So sometimes that's a memory trigger to remember how to play this scale. Also, as we said before, you can look at the intervals. We got root, major second, major third, augmented 4th, perfect 5th, major 6th, major 7, and octave. So there's a series of ways that hopefully you can remember them. But let's look at usage now. Why would someone choose Lydian to play over a certain chord? Well, first of all, as always, and I repeat this for every mode video because I want it to become part of your normal analytical process when someone shows you a new scale or you learn a new scale, to find out which chord it matches. And that is to find what kind of 3rd, 5th, and 7th it has. So we start with the F. It has a major third. So right there we know the chord it's going to play over is some form of major chord. It has a perfect 5th, so there's no diminished 5th, augmented 5th. And it has a major 7th. So it has a major triad, so obviously it would play over a major triad chord. Then it has a major 7th, so it plays over a major 7 chord. So those are two really easy to find chances, or like opportunities, for how to match this scale up with the chord. Major triads, major 7 chords. Now, because of that augmented 4th, obviously, since that's the one note difference between this mode and major, it's also the reason you would use it. Let me be clear on that. If you say, oh, I'm going to do something in Lydian, but you never play the augmented 4th, you're not really playing Lydian. You're not giving us the Lydian sound because you've taken out the one note that makes it different than major scale. You might as well be playing the major scale. So it's that B natural, in this case F Lydian, the B natural to the C, or the augmented fourth to maybe the fifth, that gives it a cool sound. There's another time you can use it, and there's times we haven't really talked a lot about this, but there are chords that have sharp 11s. Now, anytime, and I've said this before, but it's a chance that this is the first video you've seen from my channel, but anytime you have a number greater than 8, and you want to know what interval it really is, initially one of the shortcuts is to just take 7 away from it. So if we have a sharp 11 chord, so a major 7 sharp 11, we take that 11, take 7 away, it's a sharp 4. Now what sharp 4 is a colloquialism for, a common slang for, is an augmented fourth. So you could come across a chord on a chart that you're playing over. It says like F major 7 sharp 11. Well, Lydian is the ideal scale because it has already a sharp fourth in it, which is a sharp 11. Now I want to kind of share a story with you from my time as a student at MI. Musicians Institute was such a download of information, so much input coming in. It was amazing. And part of my process to kind of get a deeper understanding of when to use some of these theoretical concepts is I would go to instructors, and like just not one instructor. I wouldn't go to one guy necessarily and just say, hey, when do you use Lydian? Or do you use Lydian a lot? Blah, blah, blah. I would go to a mini, and I had a kind of a regular committee of guys. I would casually go to their open counselings, or if I saw them in the hall, I'd say, hey, can I ask you a question? And then they were always so gracious with their time. And that group consisted of guys like Steve Bailey, Dave Keefe, Jeff Berlin, Jim Lacefield, Gary Willis. I mean, I would just can go down the line, Jim Reeves. And I would go to these guys and just say, hey, tell me, how do you use Lydian? Or is it a common scale? Is it something worth really investing time? Now, sometimes when I would go and ask them a question, I'd get a variety of answers. And so my process was to remember and write down what everyone said and take the most common answer. So I believe I usually asked 10 people, 10 bass instructors minimum. And so like if 6 said one thing and the rest kind of had different things, I would take those 6 and that would be what I would focus on, because it was just so much information and I had to kind of get it on my fingers quickly. Now the reason I'm telling you this is when I asked them about Lydian, and I believe I framed it as like, hey, I'm trying to get my grips on like when to use Lydian. Do you find yourself using Lydian a lot? Every single one of the people I asked said, oh, anytime I see any major chord in a jazz tune, I play Lydian, I don't play Ionian. And my question is like, well, even if like the chord in question is the 1 chord or the 4 chord, 1 chord, you would still use Lydian instead of using it if the chord was functioning as the 4 chord. And they were like, oh yeah, because I'm just using that color tone, that augmented fourth, I'm using it even on a 1 chord. Every single one said, oh, I never play Ionian, or I rarely play Ionian on a major chord. I'll play Lydian. And so that really struck me, because some of these guys, all those guys, I kind of idolized and I really respected their opinions. So then I put a lot of credence in Lydian. I thought, wow, okay, this is something I need to really, focus on, and I did. So I give that to you. Hopefully, as like the research I did can kind of encourage you that if you're thinking, oh, I don't know about Lydian, just realize that some of the greatest bass players on the planet, that's a go-to scale when they see a major chord in a jazz chart or a fusion chart. It is very cool because, whereas you play Ionian, that's a chord we've all known from the early days playing the recorder or first, lessons on piano or bass or whatever. That's like a starting point. But adding that one note, that augmented fourth, there's a lot of tension in that. Whereas the major scale, there's some tension, but not like this, not that. And so that can add a lot of drama to a chord that sometimes is so restful and peaceful, which is a major triad or a major 7 chord. Having that little dash of cayenne pepper can spice up the recipe, if you will. So I really want you to consider it and study it. Now, I'm going to end this portion of the lesson by also reminding you that I'm showing you these modes all in the key of C. So I showed you C Ionian, D Dorian, E Phrygian, F Lydian. That's because now you can go through, and if I start on the C, C Ionian, D Dorian, E Phrygian, F Lydian. I've now played from this F to this C all the natural notes. It's another way to organize your fingerboard by seeing how the modes lock together. They're always in this order, meaning regardless of the key, if you play off the first note of the scale of the key, then you are going to play Ionian. If you play off the second, but only include notes in that key, you're going to get a Dorian, and so on and so forth. And it's a fun way to practice. You can go up the first one, go up Ionian, slide up and come down Dorian, go up Phrygian, and down Lydian. So it's just a couple ways to kind of practice it. And that's a nice segue to anytime I show you a scale that's new to you, it's worth going through my series. It's a short series on things to do with scales, ways to practice scales so that they really become common to your expression. You don't have to think about them. You hear them. You can identify them by ear, and you have more musical expression by doing all these exercises with the scale. So if you're finding yourself not knowing how to practice scales, that's a perfect series for you. And let me know how it goes. Let me know, what is the process? Was Lydian brand new to you and you've never studied it before? In the comments below, share your thoughts. I would love to hear them because it allows me to craft better videos in the future. And yeah, so as always, just communicate with me, and you do me a great honor. Okay, we're going to move on, and kind of in a related manner, today's encore item is Miles Davis's most amazing of all recordings on the planet, Kind of Blue from 1959. Now, why do I say that? Well, again, it goes back, and this is the reason it came to mind as I was preparing in pre-production for this video, is when I was trying to really learn jazz. I went to MI, and mostly as a rock, metal, funk bass player, had some time in blues, but I never touched jazz. It wasn't in my skill set, it wasn't in my listening as a kid, so it was brand new. And this time I went to 10 instructors that I knew were amazing jazz musicians. That was either the focus of their studies or that's the focus of what they taught us. But each one is, I remember going to a keyboard instructor who was a great, Carl Schroeder, who was a great jazz guy. I went to drummers, Ralph Humphreys, phenomenal, Steve Houghton, phenomenal. I went through all these guys, more than 10. And I said, hey, I'm new to jazz. If you were to give me one, because I didn't have much money, guys. So I said, if you could give me one album I should buy that would really get me started on my jazz journey, what album you suggest? And I would write down the answers. And once again, just like with Lydian, they all of them replied with the same answer. Kind of Blue by Miles Davis. When you have that unanimous decision, then that means, yeah, you got to check this album out. And if you haven't, and you're someone that you haven't heard this album, and you're either want to get interested in jazz or you're in jazz, and if you've studied jazz, I can't imagine you not being familiar with the songs on this album, but this is a must listen to. Also, by nature I started as a metal guy, and I was always playing metal. At the time in the 80s, you weren't the norm. You were kind of a little punk rock, if you will. There was a lot of punk rock attitude to the metal I was playing. And so I found myself really, really fascinated by Miles Davis was punk rock, man. My cat's going to say hi. Yeah, hello, Pismo. I'm talking about Miles Davis. You love Miles Davis. Okay. So ignore her. Anyway, so what's amazing, there's 5 songs on this album. Just 5. But each song is in like the common real books. Each song has been covered over and over and over again. They feature performances by some of the greatest jazz musicians of all time, but I'm going to focus on Paul Chambers, the bass player, obviously. This is a study in jazz bass. It's a study in phrasing. It's a study in dynamics. You also have some really cool things. So because it's so short, I'm going to run down every single one of the songs. So What is the opener. Check out the bass intro on So What. Iconic. I mean, just amazing. Freddie the Freeloader, great jazz blues. Blue and Green, the chord harmony in Blue and Green still warps my brain. It's amazing. It's a wonderful study. If you really want to do chord tone only drills, practice your chord tone arpeggios using compound chords or expanded chords, this is a great tune, and it really will push you. All Blues is great. All Blues is kind of one of those songs that you can memorize quickly, and it's good to have in your repertoire when you're jamming with guys because almost everyone knows it, so it's a good common song to know. And then flamenco sketches as it closes out. So just 5 songs, but a ton of material and a ton of just. It's one of those albums I call a headphone album, where you actually put your headphones on, and you just don't be distracted. Don't have your phone in your hand like surfing social media. Shut your eyes, no distractions. Listen to the entire thing, and really absorb what great jazz bass is. And that's why it's the Encore Item today. All right, guys. Well, that's it. Lydian mode, modes 4. We're going to continue on. Obviously, we'll finish off with all 7 modes. So we're halfway, more than halfway through, and then we'll do some usage videos, like common ways to apply the modes, common ways to use the modes, how they'll sound, things like that. So let me know what you think. Comments are welcomed. Comments are welcome. I'd love to get criticism or encouragement. Both are valuable to me. As always, if you can subscribe to the channel, that's so great. That really helps me. Giving me a thumbs up on the video, hitting the bell icon, all those things really not only make me feel good, but they really make YouTube feel good, and that can help me grow the channel. So I really appreciate that. I do have a nifty sheet with a chord chart or a neck diagram, so you can see how the scale actually visually looks. If you're more of a visual learner like that, then absolutely go to the link in the description to get to my Patreon page. If you become a Backstage Pass monthly subscriber, you'll actually get access to all my written material. Even if you just subscribe for a month, you can just go through the videos I've shot, over 100 videos, and just download all the PDFs for every video that needed one, and some audio files for some of the play-along things. There's no limit to how much you can download all of it, but I would encourage you hopefully to stay on, so that every month as I upload new materials, you'll have access to them. Me and my family appreciate that financial support to help this channel grow. Man, as always, guys, you're the best. I really enjoy time. My cat Pismo says hi, and I will see you at the next video. Huh, Piz? Yeah, you love it? Do you like jazz?